Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Talking Cardboard. My name is Cory.
And I'm John.
And today we are reviewing the game Godtear. Alright, yeah, and like we said, we are reviewing the game Godtear today. It is a two-player 1v1 style miniatures game with, it's kind of a dice chucker. It's got a lot going on to it. John, tell everybody how it works.
This game is semi-complex, but on the surface, all you're doing is you have two teams of 2 to 3 heroes each with their followers, and essentially you're just battling over the most points during each round. There's 5 rounds to the game. First person to 5 points in the game wins. The rounds are worth different amount of points. Obviously the middle rounds are worth a little more than the starter end rounds. And essentially you're just performing a couple actions each turn with each of your heroes and followers. The cool part about the game is that all the heroes and followers that come as a warband are actually unique and have different abilities, stats, all that. So really, there's a lot of variability. I don't know, there's probably tons of rules I'm missing, but that's kind of the general synopsis, and you just kind of fight over this battlefield and try to collect those points each round.
Yeah, and like John said too, each faction is just completely different. From not only the little followers, but to the heroes themselves. They all have different abilities, and they either work or sometimes not work as well together, depending on what their abilities are. But for me, getting to the pros of the game right away, I would say my first pro is that I really like how the tug-of-war system works over points each round. Like John alluded to in the overview of the game as well, the different rounds are worth different points. So the first round is 1 point, second round is 2 points, into the third round is worth the most at 3 points, and each round you win, you gain that token for that amount of points. The first player up to 5 points wins the game. So there are some rounds where you kind of might want to throw the round just to get into better position with your characters, for future rounds that are worth more points. Right. So that's my first pro to the game.
Yeah, my biggest pro by far are the warbands themselves. Like I said, each of these are their own unique play style, have their own unique hero, their own unique followers, and they kind of have, abilities that synergize together. So figuring out how to take each individual warband and pair them into groups of 2 or 3 to create your full fighting force, I think is really awesome. Plus, as you can see here, the models for the warbands also look really awesome. So they did a great job with that. They're not just some, generic figures you're throwing on the board and using some cards to track the followers and heroes. It's actually, everything is sculpted for that warband and looks really great.
Yeah, and not only that, each faction comes with its own backstory, specifically too, and there are different colors of different factions, which also means different things as well. I forget the titles or the names of.
Yeah, I know red is like your Slayers, so they're really good at killing other heroes. Yellow is your Maelstroms. They more specialize in killing like enemy followers. I don't remember what green or blue are called, but both of them either have to do with protecting the flags that you're trying to plant for points, or actually going out and creating the flags that you're using to generate points. So those two obviously kind of synergize together as well. So that's a really cool, unique aspect to this game too. Yep.
And in this game too, it is like we said, a miniature style game that you're building all these different factions. So as of right now, during the time of the filming of this video, there's only 2 base boxes. Each of them come with different factions and all the rules and everything that you need to get started with a game. And in that rule book comes with a varied number of scenarios as well, which is kind of cool. We've only kind of dabbled into the first scenario multiple times to kind of get a feel for the game, but each scenario is different. I can already see by reading forward that each scenario is completely different. For example, the one that we played, which is another pro for me, is that whoever lost the round actually gets to roll out a die and add 2 to that die value to then place out more Godtear tiles. And the placement of those tiles really matter a lot, because you can only plant your flag on those Godtear tiles. So and they also block minions from being able to move around too, because minions, or I guess the followers, cannot move on top of or over those tiles too. So just, I'm going to say it a million times, the jockeying for position, the maneuvering, the trying to get your miniatures in the best positions they can for not only the current round but future rounds is what I really enjoy about it.
As well as like the efficiency of your actions, because it's like every time you activate a hero or minion, it's like they pick 2 actions for a reason.
Yeah.
Because 3, it's like you always want to do 3 actions, and it's always like, nope, you're limited to 2, and that's between like moving, attacking, using utility actions, just things like that. Each hero also has like a ultimate ability that they can use 1 per game. Those are obviously always really powerful if you use them right. Sometimes you can kind of pop those and lose out on them, but that's part of what makes this game so interesting. There's just a lot of strategy involved on when to, use your ultimates and then make the best use of the actions you're given.
Right. And what's cool too is that there are the generic swath of rules for the game, but some of these cards break the rules with their different effects too. Like this Nia or Naya, whatever her name is, her special thing is if she has all of her followers out, she gets an additional action to use during that turn. So like John said, actions are very tight. You always want to do at least 3, and you're only given 2 at the beginning of every turn. So she gets that third action, but then again, it kind of balances out with she can't move as quickly either. So a lot of cool balancing techniques to the game. Some factions don't feel as powerful combining them with certain factions, but I can see how the opposite is true too.
One thing I didn't mention with the rules that I think is actually really cool too is you actually have a plot phase and a combat phase. And in the plot phase, you're kind of just moving your guys around, maybe casting a few spells that might help you out. In the combat phase, and you're also planting your flags that you then have to defend and keep secure to gain points at the end of the combat phase. And then you hit that combat phase, and now instead of, in the plot phase, one player takes all their plot actions, the other player does their plot actions, but in combat, you're actually switching back and forth between activating a hero or group of followers, and that's really important because you might lose a unit that you were hoping to take a big swing with or trample a flag or something. So there's a lot of balancing and strategic maneuvering in this game, and you just really have to be thinking on your toes to make your strategy work.
Yeah, and I know multiple times when we were playing too, like, I thought, should I activate my hero that's heavily damaged and wounded and he's about to die before John activates to try to take him out, because I might not get that opportunity if I don't choose to activate him now and do it right away. And I know that's another pro for me for this game. I mean, I do like the more skirmish style games, kind of like X-Wing and that sort of thing. It just feels a little bit more involved. I like the different goals and strategies with the different goals as well. And what I'm alluding to is that I did play a lot of Warhammer back in the day, Warhammer 40,000, and with that style game, I think it turned me off a little bit with the rule set with that compared to this, because you activate basically your entire army and then you get to attack with your entire army and then they get to kind of come back at you. But by then, if you're the player who's going second, you might be coming back at them with half the amount of forces, and it just felt a little imbalanced with that, where this game, it coming out in 2019, just a couple of years ago, really benefited from taking and kind of evolving on that platform. So really, really enjoying it. Moving into the cons, I guess I can start with the cons for me. The initial con I can think of is that we played every time with only 2 heroes with their followers. I know the basic game, or the more correct way to play, is with 3 heroes with their followers, and I know tournament play is up to 4 heroes. I think the sweet spot for learning is maybe 1 or 2 heroes with their followers, because the con is that there is a lot going on. There is a learning curve. Then again, once you learn your playstyle and learn the factions and learn what their abilities are, it'll stick in your head and you don't have to really think about it any longer. But that is my first con, is that there is a little bit of a barrier to entry with learning how the factions work.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, one of my pros is the asymmetrical nature of all these war bands, but in a way, if you're a newer player, that's also going to be a con, because now you're trying to figure out what your guys do, plus your opponent's war bands, and figuring out how you either make your guys work or hinder their plan. So, there's a lot to learn. That would be the biggest con to this. Yeah,
with that asymmetry, there is a lot to learn, and John brought that up a couple times when we were playing. Everything else is real solid. Gameplay is solid. The minis are solid. The way the board state looks is solid. Everything else, I think, is real solid.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the only thing I had issue with is that my dice rolled like crap. So there is a component of rolling dice for combat damage, but A lot of games do that. It works well here.
Mhm.
I just couldn't make it work, so
Yeah,
that's
I guess
my own fault.
if you're not into dice chucking or a little bit of luck, there's not a whole lot of luck mitigation other than some of the
There's some buffs and blights,
yeah.
and they kind of help you improve the odds of rolling well, I should say.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then those pop off during the very first time that ability is activated, and only during that. So it gives you a slight buff or a slight blunder against your opponent for that one time. But then you're back to normal dice chucking again. I guess moving right into like teachability and replayability. What do you think?
Teachability. I mean, the general rules pretty easy. There's not much there. But once you're diving into the different war bands, now things are becoming a little more complicated. You definitely are going to want to maybe find a set of war bands that you can continue to play with a few times until you at least learn how those all act together.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's, pretty medium weight, I'd say. As far as replayability, the war bands also strike here in a positive way, minus the fact that you have to buy the extra ones.
Yeah.
And they're about $30 for a new warband. But obviously, you buy a new warband, you've got at least 5 or 6 games just to even learn how they work, and that's tons of replayability.
And that's some of the appeal too for people, and that adds replayability to that. Just discovering a new faction that might combo well with a different one you already had previously, which is cool and fun. And moving into strategy and tactics. I guess I'll start on that. I think the strategy is pretty high. I think it's a little bit more of a tactical game, depending on what your opponent is doing. It might kind of persuade you one way or the other, but the strategy is fun as well to try to combo your different warbands together. But the strategy more takes place with the forming of your armies, I think more at the beginning, and then the tactics really take effect during the game, where like each round feels completely different based on the board state.
Yeah.
So what do you think with strategy and tactics?
No, I totally agree. It's kind of like games like StarCraft where you have your macro and your micro strategy, whereas your macro in this is more, did you choose war bands that fit well together and you can kind of synergize together?
Yeah.
Whereas then your micro strategy kind of is, how do you take these war bands, put them on the battlefield, and use them most efficiently from round to round?
Yeah. There's a lot of blocking in different ways in this game too, so maneuvering to block is huge, which is fun as well. Moving into our overall ratings, first impressions of the game, 1 being terrible, can't stand it, 10 being one of the best games you've ever played in your life. What do you think, John, for your rating?
I did really bad in both games we played, just learning it for the first time, but I'm still going to give this an 8. I think there's a lot of potential in this. I love games where you have Warhammer style type factions, but it's not nearly as complex, so I think that helps me a lot. It's like you have a hero and the followers, and that's all you really have to learn instead of a bunch of different units.
No attachments.
Right, exactly. You're not looking at different types of weapons. It's all like, here's the 2 or 3 actions they can take, plus maybe a passive ability. Again, I think the sculptures look really cool. The board's nice. All the components are nice and makes easy to use, nothing too complex with this game. Yeah, I had a really good time even though I got completely destroyed. So 8.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a really good rating.
At least for now.
Yeah, at least for now, yeah.
Might go up depending on some of the additional war bands that we find and kind of start pairing together as we play this game. I don't see it actually probably going down. So
yeah. And for me, I've always been into the miniature style game and that sort of thing growing up, and it just kind of lost appeal, like I said a little bit earlier, with Warhammer, with various rules and the time it takes to build them and paint them and that sort of thing. So this definitely has the appeal of not having to do that. Once you buy it, it's pre-assembled minis, everything, the mold, it looks awesome, all the different factions look awesome. And it is more of a skirmish style game, which I really like too, with various almost checkpoints or goals that you're going after in the tug-of-war fight over points, which really appeals to me as well. I got into Malifaux for a little while, which is another kind of Warhammer style game, but more skirmish with goals, and that was more of the tape measures and that sort of thing. But even with the hexes now, that they just, for me, I feel like they fixed all the issues I had with the skirmish or mini style games that I had growing up. So my rating, John is completely wrong. Well, not completely, but my rating is an 8.5 out of 10. I'm going to put it a little bit higher, and it could be because I've played the game now more than John.
Yep.
I've played it, gosh, I think probably 6 or 7 times at least now, and I'm curious to not only add more factions, but get more plays to the table with the different scenarios to see how it keeps evolving on itself. I don't think I'll ever get into like the tournament style. That's another thing that appeals to me over other miniatures games is this game does feel more like a board game that you can almost just kind of pull out and have fun with, and you don't ever really have to get super involved with the different attachments and the painting of everything and the point values, and it's a little bit more of a narrow focus on the game itself versus the hobby of everything else that's usually involved with it. So yeah, 8.5 out of 10 for me. Any other final comments? Go out and get it. Go out and try it.
Yeah, at least try this game if you know someone that owns it.
Yeah.
And if you do go out and get it, grab some extra factions while you're at it, just so you have some things to play around with and figure out what you like.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, mix and match and have some fun with it. So yeah, that wraps up today's initial impressions review of Godtear. And as always, if you like the content you see here on the channel, please consider subscribing. We really do appreciate it. It helps us keep plugging along and going. Leave comments about which factions you like together in the comment section below, because it'll save us some time in the research we'll have to do. So tell us your favorite factions and what works together down in the comments. And until next time, you all have a great day.